good evening. My name's Jacke Kemp. I'm a journalist and business writer, and I'm going to talk to you today about what's been happening. We're going to start with the Ukraine update, day 422. The Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, today reaffirmed NATO's commitment that Ukraine would eventually join the military alliance. Speaking ahead of a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, um, at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, he also told the media that once the war in Ukraine ends, Kiev must have the deterrence to prevent new attacks. Ukraine's defense minister, Reznikov, posted that he had a fruitful bilateral meeting with his US counterpart at Ramstein Air Base in Germany this morning. A Russian warplane has accidentally fired a weapon into the Russian city of Belgorod, close to the Ukrainian border, causing an explosion and damaging buildings and leaving a 20-meter wide crater in the city centre. Ukraine's air defense has claimed to have downed 8 Iranian-manufactured Shahed drones overnight. The first trucks carrying Ukrainian food products, including corn and eggs, were bound to start transit via Poland to the Netherlands this morning, a Polish customs official said, as rules allowing the shipments took effect overnight. President Zelensky has asked Mexico for its support to organize a summit with Latin American countries to help end the Russian invasion. The appeal comes in response to comments by the Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, will meet the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Monday, according to Russia's ambassador to the UN. The Financial Times has reported that a leaked US intelligence report shows that China refused a request from the Wagner mercenary group for weapons in early 2023. Ukraine's SBU security agency have accused a group of Ukrainian servicemen of treason for giving away information during an unauthorized mission that enabled Russia to attack a military airfield when the servicemen attempted, without coordination with the relevant state authorities, to seize a Russian plane last July after its pilot said he would defect. The US and other allies of Ukraine are considering an outright ban on most exports to Russia in an attempt to increase economic pressure on the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. The US announced $325 million in new military aid for Ukraine, including additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, advanced missiles, and anti-tank mines. Okay, so that's the Ukrainian situation, which continues to be pretty grim. Dominic Raab resigns over bullying report. Dominic Raab has resigned as the UK's Deputy Prime Minister and as Justice Secretary after the official report into bullying allegations found he had acted in an intimidating manner towards civil servants. The investigation by Adam Tolley KC found Raab had, on a number of occasions, gone further than appropriate in delivering critical feedback and been insulting about work done by Ministry of Justice officials. Adam Tolley believed that while Raab did not intend to upset or humiliate officials, they found him unreasonably difficult to deal with, as he was sometimes abrasive, and while he'd regulated his level of abrasiveness, he should have altered his approach earlier. He also found that Raab, who attended 4 interviews over the 5-month inquiry into allegations about bullying behaviour in the Ministry of Justice and other Whitehall departments, had acted with unreasonably and persistently aggressive conduct while Foreign Secretary. Dominic Raab got his retaliation in first by releasing an angry resignation letter this morning before the Tolley report had been published. In his letter, Raab started by stating that he'd been cleared of all but 2 allegations, and then went on to state his disagreement with the 2 cases in which Adam Tolley found that he'd been guilty of bullying. Dominic Raab then went on to say that the conclusions of the report into his conduct set a dangerous precedent by setting the threshold for bullying so low, but said he would keep his word to quit if the report found against him. The departure of such a close political ally is a major blow to Rishi Sunak, who is facing questions over his judgment after civil servants flagged that there had been issues with Raab in his previous departments before he decided to bring him back into government. In his letter to Raab, Rishi Sunak said that the Deputy Prime Minister had rightly undertaken to resign if the report made any finding of bullying whatsoever, and acknowledged that Raab had kept his word. Mr. Sunak's letter went on to say, "It's clear that there have been shortcomings in the historic process that have negatively affected everyone involved. We should learn from this how to better handle such matters in future." Commenting, SNP Cabinet Office spokesperson Kirsty Blackman MP said, "The Tories' standing Prime Minister has no choice but to go following the publication of this damning report." In his resignation letter, Raab referred to the Tory manual on apologies and showed no sympathy towards his victims, pointing the finger at everyone else but himself. There are still huge queries for the Tories to answer about what Rishi Sunak knew about the allegations against Dominic Raab when he appointed him Deputy Prime Minister. If he knew his right-hand man was a bully, then he's also responsible for his behaviour. Voters deserve to know. Okay, so he's finally stood down. Labour select hardline unionist as candidate for Motherwell and Wishaw at the Westminster election. Unionist hardliner Pamela Nash has been selected as a Labour Party candidate for the next UK general election. Ms Nash is chief executive of Tory-funded group Scotland in Union and has been announced as the Labour Party's Westminster candidate for Motherwell and Wishaw. Last year, during the local council elections, Pamela Nash is reported to encourage voters to back the Tories to try to prevent the SNP from winning seats. Commenting, SNP MP from Motherwell, Marion Fellows said, "The pro-Brexit Labour Party cannot help themselves but try and tune up the old Better Together band one last time." Pamela Nash is the chief executive of Scotland in Union, which is a Tory for the No campaign. Just last week, Douglas Ross was urging voters to back Labour. Now Anna Sarwar's party has selected Pamela Nash, who wanted people to back the Tories at the last election. These are so similar these days that they're happy for you to vote for the other, no matter the disastrous consequences for Scotland. Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? We'll see how she gets on. The UK forecourts are accused of inflating the price of diesel fuel. Forecourt owners in the UK are adding to soaring inflation for consumers by charging many businesses that rely on diesel more than necessary at the pumps, campaigners have claimed. The pump price for diesel is about 10% higher for petrol, even though the wholesale market price difference is much less, reigniting concerns that forecourt owners are profiteering at the expense of diesel drivers. The RAC estimates that on average, forecourt owners are making double the profit from diesel users, which are often vans and trucks serving retail businesses, compared with the margins for sales of petrol. Steve Gooding, the director of the RAC Foundation, said, "Diesel drivers could be forgiven for thinking that they're being taken advantage of. The wholesale price of the fuel is now below that of petrol, yet it still costs 15p a litre or so more at the pumps, much more than the historical gap of between 5 and 10p. The average pump price of diesel is 160.7 pence a litre, compared with 146.9p for petrol per litre, according to data from the RAC. The higher pump prices inflated the profits made by retailers to 22.36p a litre for diesel. This compares with a profit margin of about 9.16p a litre for petrol. Gooding added, "Typically diesel has been seen as a commercial fuel, with hauliers and businesses regarded as less sensitive than private motorists to price movements, and with the option to pass on at least some of the price they pay to their customers. However, that simply means that the cost of living for all of us, drivers or not, goes up. It's estimated that diesel drivers have paid on average 19.85 pence a litre more than petrol users since the start of the year, while wholesale market prices for the former fuel have been on average only 2.4 pence a litre higher over the same period. As a consequence, diesel users may have paid an extra 1.3 billion at the pump since the start of the year, which could be contributing to inflated costs across the economy." A government spokesperson said, "We urge all retailers to ensure savings on fuel are passed on to drivers and will act if necessary to enable customers to get a fair deal on their fuel." We'll see if that happens. 0.9% fall in UK retail sales. Monthly retail sales volumes in the UK are estimated to have fallen by 0.9% in March 2023, following a rise of 1.1% in February 2023, revised down from an increase of 1.2% in the previous period. More broadly, sales volumes rose by 0.6% in the 3 months to March 2023 compared with the previous 3 months. That's the highest rate and the first rise in this series since August 2021. Retail sales volumes in March 2023 were 3.1% lower than the same month last year and 0.7% below the pre-COVID February 2020 level. The latest reporting period covers the 26th of February to the 1st of April, so it excludes the school Easter holiday period. Other findings of the report are: non-food store sales volumes fell by 1.3% in March, following a rise of 2.4% in February, with feedback from retailers that poor weather conditions through most of March affected sales. Food store volumes fell by 0.7% in March, following 0.6% in February, and that's been partly influenced by the food shortages in the month, which affected food sales. Non-store retailing sales volumes fell by 0.8% in March, following a rise of 0.3% in February. Motor fuel sales volumes rose by 0.2%, following a fall of 1.2% in February. Sales remain 8.5% below their pre-COVID February 2020 level. The report refers to volume of retail sales and not the value of the sales, which have been rising due to the UK's record level of inflation and cost of living crisis. The Canadian police are investigating $20 million of high-value cargo stolen from Toronto Airport. Police in Canada are investigating the theft of nearly $20 million, US $14.8 million, that's 20 million Canadian dollars, in gold and other high-value items in a robbery at Toronto's Pearson Airport. On Thursday evening, Peel Regional Police announced that the gold and other goods were stolen on Monday after containers were offloaded from an aircraft. An aircraft arrived here at the airport in the early evening. As per normal procedure, the aircraft was unloaded and cargo was transported from the aircraft to a holding cargo facility, Inspector Stephen Doveston said while announcing the theft. What I can say is that the container had a high-value shipment. It did contain gold, but wasn't exclusive to gold, and contained other items of monetary value. Investigators from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were also looking into the theft, which is one of the largest in Canadian history. The Greater Toronto Airports Authority, citing the active police investigation, declined to comment on the theft. Gold mines from northern Ontario often ship bullion through the city's airport, which handles nearly half of the country's air cargo. Doveston said he wouldn't call it a professional job at this time, adding that the investigation was ongoing and the incident was isolated. Police did not identify the intended destination of the stolen cargo, and they didn't confirm that the gold was still in the country. Right-wing extremists have been defeated by Democrats in a US school board election. Scores of right-wing extremists were defeated in school board elections in April in a victory for the left in the US, and what Democrats hoped could prove to be a playbook for running against Republicans in the year ahead. In Illinois, Democrats said more than 70% of the school board candidates it had endorsed won their races, often defeating the kind of anti-LGBTQ plus culture warrior candidates who've taken control of school boards across the country. Republican-backed candidates in Wisconsin also fared poorly. Moms for Liberty, a right-wing group linked to wealthy Republican donors, which has been behind book banning campaigns in the US, said only 8 of its endorsed candidates won election to school boards, and other conservative groups also reported disappointing performances. The results came as education and free speech organizations have warned of a new surge in book bans in public schools in America. Over the past 2 years, conservatives in states around the US have removed hundreds of books from school classrooms and libraries. The targeted books have largely been texts which address race and LGBTQ issues or are written by people of color or LGBTQ authors. The Democratic Party of Illinois spent $300,000 on races in Illinois, the Chicago Tribune reported, endorsing dozens of candidates. The party said 84 of 117 candidates had recommended won their races. Teachers' unions, including the Illinois Education Association, endorsed candidates in school board elections around the state. The IEA backed candidates in about 100 races, and around 90% of them won, said Kathy Griffin, the organization's president. Union-endorsed candidates won 2/3 of their school board races in Milwaukee, the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported, although Republican-supported candidates performed better in rural areas. With other states holding school board elections later this year and a critical presidential election in 2024, the successes offered some hope for Democrats. And now we're on to some Scottish news. The Scottish Government Education Secretary meets learners ahead of exams. Education Jenny Gilruth met with staff and learners ahead of this year's exams. Returning to the Royal High School in Edinburgh, where she previously taught, Ms Gilruth heard about the preparations underway for this year's exams, which start on Monday and run for 5 weeks. Earlier this week, the Education Secretary set out plans to rebuild and reshape how education is delivered as part of the Scottish Government's policy prospectus, Equality, Opportunity, Community, New Leadership, A Fresh Start. Ms Gilruth said, "I want to thank the pupils and my friends and the teaching staff for welcoming me back to the Royal High School to hear about their preparations for this year's exams, which start next week. During this time, we will see around 130,000 learners sitting National 5, higher and advanced higher exams in a variety of subjects across the whole of Scotland. I would like to thank all learners for their dedication and resilience during what has been another challenging year, and importantly, I would like to wish them every success and good luck in their exams this year. As set out in our policy prospectus this week, I'm focused on ensuring that Scotland's education system strives for excellence and equity for all, with a continued focus on closing the poverty-related attainment gap. The Scottish Government publishes legal services reform. Legal sector reforms, including proposals to simplify the complaints process for consumers and legal professionals, have been published in a Scottish Government bill introduced in Parliament. The Regulation of Legal Services Scotland Bill would for the first time make it possible for complaints to be made against those who provide legal services to the public but who are not regulated. The appeal process for complaints about poor service will be simplified in line with an ombudsman approach, hoping to make the system more accessible and affordable. If passed by Parliament, the bill would also place legal duties on the profession's current regulators, the Law Society of Scotland, the Faculty of Advocates and the Association of Commercial Attorneys, to be more transparent and accountable in their regulatory work. They will be required to protect the principle that consumers should be treated fairly at all times and have access to a range of legal services which are affordable and suited to their needs. Government ministers will also be able to launch a review of the regulators and require them to make improvements or impose financial sanctions if they fail to regulate in the public interest. Subject to Parliament's approval, the bill would also remove restrictions preventing charities, law centres and citizens' advice bodies from directly employing solicitors to provide certain legal services to some of the country's most vulnerable citizens. Growth and competition within the legal services sector will also be supported by making it easier for legal firms to go into partnership with other types of professionals, such as accountants, to provide shared services. Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Siobhan Brown, said, "As a service which is often accessed by people during times of great stress or trauma, improvements to the regulatory structures are needed to further support people's access to justice. By ensuring that Scotland has a forward-looking legal regulatory framework, we will promote competition and innovation while ensuring that consumer interests are safeguarded." Scottish Government funding for emergency relief for Malawi. Two charities will each receive $200,000 from the Scottish Government for emergency relief projects in Malawi after the country was hit by severe flooding following a record-breaking cyclone in March. More than 500 people were killed and over 500,000 displaced as a result of Tropical Cyclone Freddy, which struck even as Malawi was dealing with the deadliest cholera outbreak in the country's recorded history. The funds being given to Scottish Catholic International Aid Fund, SCIAF, and Save the Children International will be used to provide food, shelter, and improved access to water, sanitation, and healthcare for those affected by the cyclone. International Development Minister Christina McKelvey said, "The loss of life and substantial damage to thousands of people's homes and livelihoods in Malawi is devastating, particularly at a time when the country is facing a severe cholera outbreak. Scotland has a long-standing relationship with Malawi, and our ability to fund this humanitarian response is a good example of the role and importance of the Scottish Government's strong international relationships." The Scottish Government announces £15 million for mental health. Projects to support mental health and address social isolation and loneliness in adults will share a further £15 million this year. The Community's Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund for Adults, launched in 2021, has now provided around 3,300 grants to community organisations delivering mental health and wellbeing support, bringing total investment to £51 million. Activities will target older people, areas of economic deprivation, people with long-term health conditions or disability, and LGBTI communities. The fund has also had a particular focus on responding to the cost of living crisis, which remains a priority this year. Improved mental health and wellbeing support is one of the commitments in the Scottish Government's policy prospectus, which outlines firm actions to be achieved by 2026. Health Secretary Michael Matheson visited Pause and Breathe, a social enterprise in High Bonnybridge today, Friday, April the 21st, where he announced the additional funding. He said, "This investment reflects the importance we place on promoting good mental health and early intervention for those facing mental health challenges, ensuring that people can access a range of different types of help to match their needs. The fund will continue to support a range of valuable community mental health and wellbeing projects, reflecting one of the priorities set out by the First Minister earlier this week." So those are some interesting stories. So another one about the EU acting to protect honey, because there's an awful lot of honey which is not really honey, and it's sugar syrup that's been diluted. And I would really like to see Britain do something about that too, but the EU is going to act upon it first. which is not surprising. Um, so we don't have a guest this evening, so it's just a kind of quick one, just to sort of run through of some of the big stories of the day. But I hope everyone has a nice weekend. I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who's donated and to everyone who's signed up to make a regularly monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We've set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night, and thank you for watching.